So what I mean by that is that there's no one way to make it in the writing or film business, right? If anybody tells you that, they're bullshitting you.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Creative Haven, and I am here with my really good friend Koji Steven Sakai, a writer producer that I've known for over 10 years, even longer than that. And it's been great to create with Koji and at the same time just talk about life every once in a while. I've just been a friend ever since we first met. We were just talking about, I don't know how we met. It's been so long ago. But before I get into that, Koji, I would love for you to tell the audience more about your history, your background, and how you got to where you are today.
All right. Hi everybody. Hi Mitchell. It's good to be on. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Um, I started writing when I was a kid. I was writing shitty poems that were really bad. But it all started when I was in water polo at a prep school, and I was lying about my life to everybody for like the entire season. And then one day on a bus trip on the way home, I just made up this really elaborate story, and my coach was like, you should become a writer. And I was like, that was the first time that I thought maybe I should become a writer. And then I wrote, like I said, I wrote bad poems. And eventually I went to USC, a writing program where I wanted to write the great American novel, but it was terrible. I couldn't write fiction. I couldn't write prose, apparently. Nobody was buying my stuff. Nobody's interested. Couldn't do anything. And then I was going to quit school at the time, but my girlfriend at the time was like, you spent all this money at USC. You have to like figure it out. So then I took a screenwriting class with Sid Fields.
Yes, the old school legend.
Old school, yeah. So I took that class and I was like, oh, this is my writing. And over spring break, I wrote a script that I ended up optioning. So it was my first script that I sold.
Nice.
And then I was like, this is awesome. I could totally do this. And then from there, I just started writing a lot of screenplays. So at the end of the day, I think I've written 7 films that have been produced, feature films that have been produced.
Hell yeah.
I've produced a couple of them. I've done some TV. I've done some books, and I've done a couple of graphic novels, and I'm just all over the place. So that's me. And I'm a father, and I'm Japanese American, and I live in South Pasadena. And
Love it.
Married.
Married. You like long walks in your backyard and
puppies. I like puppies too.
Puppies are beautiful. No, Coach, you know what's crazy? I remember now that we also were part of the PGA diversity program, and we wrote a pilot together.
That's
out
right.
for fame, which I still think is ahead of its time. It might need to, make its way out. And I didn't know that about your background. About you've been a writer all your life. And so when you talk about coming up with these stories these elaborate stories that you were telling, people in your prep school, and just like everything that you've been writing, where does it come from? Do you feel like you get these ideas from the ether? Is it something that you're looking around in life and just like, hey, I want to write about that? Like, where do you get your inspiration from for the subjects you write about?
Actually, that's a great question. I'm also a professor. I teach screenwriting at different universities, but one of the things I always tell my students, and I keep track in my own life, is that sitting around waiting for inspiration is actually the worst way to get inspired.
That's right.
I want to be, I say I want to be a student of life. So I'm constantly reading. I'm reading books. I'm reading magazines. I'm reading graphic novels. I'm reading books. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm listening to audiobooks. I'm talking to people. Back in the day when you could go to Starbucks and talk to people, I used to talk to people. My wife hated it. But, and actually 2 of my TV shows I was pitching last year were actually ideas I found on Facebook. One of my friends would post something and say, did you know about this? And I'm like, no. I was like, this is awesome. And then I did research, and obviously it wasn't exactly from the post, but just like the idea kind of came. So, for me, ideas come from just everywhere. I want to be out, and I want to be about. I really want to know things. One of my really close friends told me that, the moment you stop listening to music is the moment you're old.
Whew.
And so I want to I take that to heart. I really want to be able to listen to new music. I want to listen to new music, and I want to always experience new things. And that helps me get these ideas.
Nice. And now in that spirit, have you been watching any new shows, TV, streaming, or movies, new ones that have actually inspired you, or like you thought, okay, this is really interesting and new that you've never seen before?
I watch television and films differently than the normal person. I'm watching it for structure. I'm watching it for things that I could do in my own writing.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at it a little bit differently. Typically, when I'm excited about a movie or TV show is when I'm not thinking about those things. And so the last couple of movies that have done that have been I Care About You on Netflix, right?
Oof, I haven't seen that.
Which is really crazy. It's a crazy movie. And A Map of Perfect Little Things on Amazon Prime was a really great movie about, it's like a little bit of a romantic comedy with teens. So, I mean, there are a couple movies that do that, but again, it's, when I'm watching it, I'm not watching it like the normal person. And I don't
Yeah,
typically watch seasons as well because I have to watch as much TV as possible. But I
yeah.
need to watch broadly. So I usually watch the pilot and I watch like 1 or 2 episodes and then I move on.
That's a good technique, especially in the days now where there's so many different types of shows out there. And I remember going through, GOT, the days when you would go through Game of Thrones. It was once a year, but having to binge watch that, I mean, it's a tough show to really binge watch unless you have like no job and nothing to do all day. But for you, when you are creating your own shows or whatnot, do you think 5 seasons out, 10 seasons, what's your magic season number for your shows?
I think more and more nowadays, people are looking at limited seasons,
Ah,
limited kind of like one season kind of things. So
mhm.
I've been writing more and more of those, like 6 to 8 episodes. It's basically a really long movie, and then ideally,
Mhm.
if the movie does well, or sorry, if the show does well, then it'll get picked up in the future. But I'm really
Nice.
looking at kind of these limited series is kind of where I've been spending most of my time because it's most like a movie. It's just a really really long ass movie,
do
right?
you do you do you find now that TV is just a a more interesting medium for you to write, or are you still thinking as features as like your, I don't know, like the something that you've always wanted to write for? Like, did you get into writing when you read in Sid Field class? Because he was in features, right? It's
Yeah.
more about features. Uh, have you gravitated towards the feature realm? I mean, the TV realm, or are you still thinking I love film?
Well, I mean, I think my bread and butter is always going to be feature films.
Yeah.
That's what I was trained in. But over the last like 10 to 15 years, feature films have become more like TV.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, structurally TV was super different than film. So there were two totally almost
Mm.
totally different kinds of writing. But now TV is much more like features. And so I think that there's more opportunity. And because there's more opportunity in TV now, there's more places for us to, or for people like myself to be able to pitch because there's so
Mm-hmm.
many places that
Mm-hmm.
need content. And so I have a bunch of projects that I'm pitching that I'm out there trying to get made because like now they're just looking for writers who can write as opposed to before they're only looking for TV writers who could write. Now they're just looking for
Mm.
writers who could write in general.
That's great. I mean, also because you're teaching screenwriting, and so you're going through the different types of mediums now that require some sort of creative writer to come up with the idea. So, like now we have YouTube, we've got Hulu, we've got Amazon Prime. There's so many different platforms to write for. Do you feel there is a new type of writing that's coming out? I mean, we have YouTube, like short form. There was Quibi,
Yeah.
right? Or that, what was that? 10 minutes, 5 minutes?
Yeah,
Uh,
it was short content. I mean, the average viewer on YouTube watches 4 minutes of content, I think, at a time, and it's like the
yeah.
number one streamed site of all the sites. And so I think Quibi was kind of going off that idea, like, what if we could
Hmm.
make produce content for like 5 minute produce content that is much better than what some random person's making. That was the idea. I mean, I think it's actually a good idea. I just think that I'm not sure that they executed it great, but I think it's still a good idea in terms of what how people view stuff.
Yeah. Have you found there is like I mean, the new form when it comes down to storytelling, there is like we were taught the 3 act structure, right? Or we're taught character arcs, we're taught the different beats that you have to hit. Are you finding that there's like these new short form ways of telling stories, like with TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, that are breaking the norm, or is actually following the same storytelling techniques that we've been using all these generations?
Yeah. So 3 act structure is just a fancy way of saying beginning, middle, and end.
Yep.
And so like I think that if you're a storyteller, you naturally hit these beats as a storyteller.
Hmm.
So if you're telling a story, you're like you introduce the characters, something happens that sets the journey off, and then there's a low point to the story, right, where something
Hmm.
happens to the main character. He or she has to come back and fight whoever's keeping that person down, and then the end of the movie, end of the story. So I don't think it's changed as much as everybody wants to believe.
Hmm.
I do have I do write for China, and I write for other places because a lot of those kind of developing countries and kind of this market of entertainment, they don't have a lot of writers who know the 3 act structure as well as like somebody who's been, I mean, like my whole like brand is 3 act structure. So I think that there is still a need for it. It's just now, how do you do the 3 act structure with in short form or in different content in different ways. So, the things that are still important are like, are the characters interesting? Is the story interesting? Do we relate to the characters? Do we root for the characters? Those are all still valid no matter what medium you choose.
I love talking to you about how many types of projects you have sold and also pitched, and everything that you've been working with. Do you feel that when you've been pitching it to different platforms in different countries, like there's a specific trend right now that people are looking for that writers should know about?
Other than writing good stuff, no.
Exactly.
No, I think the biggest mistake that screenwriters make in general is that they think that the script is the most important thing, whereas it's not the most important thing. It's actually the IP behind the script. So when I do a script, especially like something spec, I start to think about what can I do other than write a movie, right? So I start thinking maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a narrative podcast, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a graphic novel or a short story or a play. Because that's where like the more I get the other IP, the more it helps me on my own career.
Yeah.
It helps my movie making. And so it's not the script that's valuable, it's the idea behind the script that's actually valuable. So I think as you take it to other platforms, as you take it to other places, you got to be flexible with your idea. Like one of my examples is I wrote a book called originally it was a movie script called Romeo and Juliet versus Zombies.
Yes.
I pitched it around, nobody really wanted to buy it. And then I pitched to a novel, like a publisher who wanted me to rewrite it as a novel. So I rewrote it as a novel. And then right when it became a novel, all of a sudden people were interested in the script. I pitched it around again. And then somebody wanted to make a play out of it. So I wrote it as a play, somebody optioned it as a play. Then it became options as a TV show. And now it's optioned as a feature film. So it's like, it had as a whole new life because I kind of was able to expand this idea of like the IP of the show,
Oh, I love that. That's great advice. And it's also coming from your producer mind, because I've been talking to writers recently, and the idea of producing, or just the business side of the creativity and entertainment, usually doesn't cross paths with an artist or whatnot. And for you to have that producing mind and that business background of like having to find funding for a film, it helps with you writing, because you kind of know what you need to write in order for something to get picked up or whatnot. And so what was that moment when you transitioned from writing, and then having to put on that producer hat? And what have you learned that has helped you with your writing, being a producer?
I mean, I think I was always a producer-like person. I always call myself a businessman, a business person so that was always, and I think a lot of it's a hustle for me in terms of, I think that me becoming a producer was just in the beginning was a way for me to make my own movies or to work on my own scripts. But then it became a little bit more than that. But for me as a writer, what I teach and what I do is that you can't divorce the writing from the business.
Nice.
From the very beginning, like, the first question I ask myself is, what kind of movie is this? Is this a micro budget, like $10,000 movie, or is this a $5 million movie, or is this a $100 million movie? Those are all very, very different kinds of movies. I know a lot of writing teachers who say, "Oh, don't think about the budget." I'm like, but that's impossible. The budget is the most important part of it, because it will like either limit my idea and thinking, or it will unleash my thinking because I could do whatever I want, But one thing I will say is, just because something's micro budget or low doesn't necessarily mean that I don't have bigger plans. For example, I'm about to shoot a movie next month, and it's like a super low budget movie. It's like $100,000. But my plan is that I assume it's going to do well and do awesome. But it's the IP, underlying IP, that's important. So my goal is that it's an awesome world. And so what I want is that this movie does well, and then I can make the $100 million version of it not the same movie, but in that same world, because it's not the movie that's important. It's the IP, that's the world that I'm creating that's important. This scenario,
Love that. And so as a producer and also as a writer and someone who creates that IP, what do you advise writers who want to protect that IP and make sure that they don't sell it away when they sell the script, and make sure that they hold on to that IP so that they can create that play or that novel or that comic book.
Well, you gotta, I mean, you gotta know what you want to do. So for example, like, yeah, like if I'm making a graphic novel, my negotiations with the graphic novel company begin with, I'm not selling my film and TV rights, right? Because that's literally the reason I want to make this graphic novel.
That's right.
So understanding what you want to do, what your ultimate goal is really important. So you can't just give away stuff, and you can't just, and so if I'm making other IP, I need to make sure that I'm retaining the rights that I want to keep.
And usually that involves an agent and a lawyer, an attorney, or a manager to negotiate that for you. Or you can be a badass like Koji and just do it yourself.
Well, it's sometimes it's other people, but I think that I don't have a problem telling people what what I want, and because my philosophy in business in general is that I want to be a good person as much as possible. I'm trying not to screw people. I don't want to hurt anybody, and I want to be fair.
I love that.
And of course, I cover myself as much as possible with the lawyers and everything, but I want to make sure that I make the deal and that it's a fair deal for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had that feeling and vibe from you, Coach, from the first time we met. That's why I always want to work with you, and at the same time, just always want to talk to you because you're just good people that has a good heart. The type of person to be that LA, sneaky guy that's gonna take that project away from somebody without telling them. But for you, as you like you said, you're a father. As you were, creating your family and building and growing your family and everything that's going on. How do you find time to actually do all of this? I think I emailed you saying I'm really impressed on how you do this time management. So how have you split up your time so you can stay creative while also spending time with your kids and also your wife?
Yeah, so this is an important question. I think this is one of the things I teach writing students as well, is that it's mind frame. First and foremost, this is the job. So I got to treat it like a job. I don't wait for inspiration. I don't wait for people to like something magical to happen, and I can start writing. That's the first thing I do. So I've trained myself. It's like a Pavlov's dog. So every time I open up my laptop, I'm inspired. I close my laptop, I cease to be inspired. I open my laptop, I'm inspired. I close my laptop, I cease to be inspired. And people think it's ridiculous. How can you be inspired when you open a laptop? Well, what I tell them is that if you worked at McDonald's and your manager said flip a burger, and you told that manager that you are not inspired to flip burgers, they would fire you. And it's the same thing at with my business. That when I open my computer, that means I'm ready to go and I work. I have to work. There's no like waiting for something to have magical to happen. That I'm just ready to go, and then I close my computer. I'm done. You have to get in that mind frame. So and it's about creating time. Like I get up at 4:30 every day or 4 o'clock. So when my son's before my son wakes up, I'm working. When my son's at school, I'm working. When my son is going to sleep, I work. So it's just a matter of like a hustle and a willing to put in. One of the things I tell young writers too is that I'm working on like 8 projects at a time. At a time. So when they're competing against me. These people with 1 script or 2 scripts are competing against me. So if you say no to my script, but you're looking for something else, I probably have it, and we could talk about it. Whether they want to buy it or not, that's a whole different deal. But so anyway, my biggest piece of advice then is just you've got to get in the mind frame of being inspired is something that you create on your own, as opposed to something that is magical.
That's a great point. And I think that I've found that as a consistent theme and advice from a lot of the creative people that I've interviewed here on Creative Haven. A lot of the successful ones, you really can't just wait for that moment to spark. You have to schedule your time. You have to not force yourself, but really create that time block. And that time block is your work. If you want to be paid for being creative, you got to treat it like it's your career, it's your job. You're getting paid to do this. And
I think part of it is also knowing when your time is that you're creative. Like I'm creative in the morning. So like I typically do all my writing in the morning. Anything after noon, I'm like pretty much not writing anymore. I'm doing other business related stuff, but I'm not writing. You have to know like what makes, like I know writers that write after like 9.
Right.
Yeah. I know writers that write in the day. So it just depends on the writer, I think. But this is also one of the reasons I don't believe in writer's block, because it's just a mind frame.
Yeah.
Like there's no such thing, because I'm saying, well, there's no such thing because I'm not waiting for inspiration. And by the way, what I always hear is that, somebody wrote 50 pages in one day. I'm like, congratulations. But over the course of a week, a month, a year, I'm writing more.
Yep.
Right. You might have written more than 1 page. Yeah. You might have written one day more. That's fine. but over the course of a lifetime and, whatever, I'm going to be writing more because I'm writing every single day, all the time.
That's what I'm talking about right there. It's just your craft. This is you. This is how you are going to give back to the world and use the God-given talent that you have. And my question was, when you're writing and you're coming at from I'm just gonna say it, man, from an Asian American point of view, and during these days and time when you've seen a lot of different stories come out there, do you find yourself trying to write from that mind frame of like, I want to really create stories that really help the culture, bring out stories from the community that never been told? Or do you find yourself also saying, hey, I'm a writer. I just want to write. And I'm proud of my heritage. At the same time, I'm a movie. I write movies and I write TV, and I can write things about zombies and not have to care about, making a stand or a statement with my writing.
Good question. I mean, I don't think I could divorce myself from being Asian American or Japanese American for my writing. So I think that first and foremost, I always bring that perspective to everything I write. Whether there's an Asian person or not in it, I think that it's an important perspective that I have that's different than other writers. But I always try to add diversity. One of the things I think I feel very strongly about is I write the races of all my characters into my scripts. Because I don't believe in open casting. One of the things that I was actually on another podcast a couple months ago where I was telling the person that, when I read a book, and unless their name's Koji, I don't imagine them Asian. Like I've never imagined them Asian. I always imagine them as white, Protestant, good looking, male, probably blonde hair. And he was surprised because he thought everyone just imagined themselves as the role. I was like, no. And you never imagine that person is Asian unless their name's Koji, right? And so I think that it is important that I write, like Mitchel, Asian American, or Mark, African American in my script. And at the end of the day, it gets changed. It has nothing to do with whether I would write that or not. But I feel like if I put that idea that he's Black or he's Asian, then there's a better than nothing chance that ultimately that character will end up being that race. So I do think it's important. But part of my career has also been working on Asian American projects. I want to tell stories where people that look like me and my son are featured and that aren't speaking with accents or aren't being ridiculous.
Damn straight. And do you see a trend now of like more executives and studios and production companies buying these type of scripts? Do you feel like there is more opportunities overseas? Like you're writing for China, you just sold something to Disney Plus Japan. I mean, do you think doors are opening, or do you think that we still have a lot of room to grow?
I mean, I think there's a lot of room to grow. I mean, it's better than it was when we were children, right? When we were children, it was terrible. There's nothing out there that's even closely related to Asian American. I mean, I think it was like Tierra Carrera, right, was one, or Gung Ho, Dante Bosco, Gung Ho, like these were terrible examples of Asian
Jackie
American.
Chan.
Yeah, Jackie.
Well, he's the Asian.
But I think now things are better, but I think there's a lot to grow, and I think that there's still like this perception that something is foreign versus something that is like Native American, or like not Native American, as like indigenous, but like people who are from America. I think that I've been lucky to have a career in Asia, working on stuff in Asia, but I don't think it's normal for Asian Americans to be working in Asia necessarily.
Really?
Well, because ultimately, I think in Asia, there's a lot of still ethnic issues, right, between groups and
that's right. Yep.
And also, like, ultimately, I don't write in these languages, so I mean, it's hard for people to do it in a lot of ways, but yeah, so that's a long way of saying I think there's room to grow. And I think it's awesome that there's all these really great Asian American projects out there that are doing well and people watch it. I remember Always Be My Baby came out a couple years ago.
Love that.
And I remember, like this Caucasian parent was talking to me about it. And I was like, yes, I know. Like, I know all the Asian things that are happening, right? Asian American things that are happening. But it was awesome that she was telling me about it, because that meant that it penetrated past like Asian American people, and went to like a group of people that were different than us, so I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they're just human stories, and it's just told in a way where it takes part in someone's culture and their lifestyle, and it happens to be Asian. I mean, people should just really look at these characters as a reflection of themselves or people they know, and appreciate that people are different, but we do share some values, some of the same human values, and sometimes the same stories. And you brought up a really good point about how when you are another type of Asian, like Japanese, writing for something in China, there's like, of course, some conflict. And now when you have different, I mean, there's always Japanese cinema has been legendary, and then Korean cinema, and then China, Hong Kong, and Chinese cinema, and then you have Southeast Asian now. Have you found like there's been any cooperation between these, the countries, or do you still feel there's still some separation between these countries? I haven't really seen any like Japanese, Chinese, Korean, like Philippines, like Vietnamese collaborations. Like, do you feel like it's still separated?
Very separated. Yeah. They're all
Yeah,
very, I mean, there's still a lot of history. I mean, there's a lot of history longer than America existed between these countries.
that's
You know, I
right.
mean, people talk about World War II in Japan, but a lot of this happened way before Japan and World War II. I mean, Japan did terrible things in World War II, but even before that, there was a lot of issues before like
Mhm.
1940. So I think it's, or 1930s, I should say. So, you know, I think it's going to take a while for any kind of pan Asian. I mean, even the idea of Asian American is an American thing,
Right,
right? Like
right, right.
they don't consider themselves. I mean, even the idea of Asian is an American thing or a Western thing,
Mm.
right? Because they don't see themselves as Asian; they see themselves as Japanese or they see themselves as Chinese
Mhm,
or whatever
mhm.
they are. You know, so
It is true. I mean, same with Europeans, right? We'll just say, yeah, yeah, you're European. Like Portuguese and Polish, like
yeah,
they're just
exactly.
different. Russian and England, like it's all different. And so I think it's important for people to know that there are different countries and also different nationalities and ethnicities, right, within continents, that you can't just loop them into one word, and you have to be mindful of that. And so coming back to that, when you are researching about, different characters in a script, what is your research method so that you stick true to that character? Like, if they're Asian American, you research about if they're Filipino, then more Filipino culture, or if it's African American, I want to research about if you lived in Atlanta. Here you go. What's your research method like for coming up with characters?
Google. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia. No, I have this whole like method of kind of breaking down characters. I go through these kind of exercises that I do in terms of trying to figure it out. But it's in terms of like ethnicity and race, I don't do that kind of research.
Mhm.
Only because I feel like it's like, first of all, I would never really understand a culture by reading about it on the internet. What I focus on is more about the human part of their struggles and their,
Yeah.
you know, and for example, when I'm writing in Asia, like China, when I write for China, I have no idea like the community, the town, the city, you know, like even the culture stuff. I have no
Mhm.
idea. So what I try to focus on is the the story, right? What's
Mhm.
happening, what the characters are doing, and then in China, for example, somebody will come in and rewrite it, right? With
Yeah.
like the jokes that make sense or kind of place it in an area in China that I have no idea, you know. But I'll try to like typically do a little bit of Google research and start looking through YouTube.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And now doing that Google research, and I know you don't have the whole idea of like catching that idea. Though when you are writing, do you go full silent, or do you listen to your new music, or do you have something going on in the background? Like, how do you get into like your creative flow when you do open up that laptop and it's ready to go?
I like silence.
You're a
So
silence person.
that's why I built an office in my house to be able to have the silence I need, which has been a little
Hmm.
bit more challenging in the pandemic because my son for a long time I had to put his desk next to mine, and so
Oh,
he's just a really loud person. So that's been very distracting to me. But I'm a silence person. But you know, sometimes like when there are times though that I need to write at like a Starbucks or something. I know it's
uh,
cliche, but it's good to have like the noise and be out and about and be able to do that. But nowadays, yeah, I like silence.
yeah. Well, what have you? I know we talked about, you're not when you stop listening to new music, you're growing old. What are you listening to these days, Koji? I mean, we also bonded over hip hop music. So, what are you listening to?
I'm trying hard to get into some of these new rappers.
Yeah,
I'm a '90s hip hop guy, so I'm
of
not a huge
course.
current, but I've been listening to a lot of mixtapes that I've downloaded from online and trying to
Nice.
find rappers that I like. Not nobody that in particular that I'm in love with, but just to keep keep an ear to what's going on, and always finding what's happening. So I don't know if anybody in particular catches my fancy at this moment, but
Yeah, I'm the
I did
same
want to
way.
name my kid Tupac, so that gives you a perspective on what's important to me.
West Side all day. And I always just also just remember this too. We talked about how you are a jujitsu person. You practice Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And
Yes.
so I know that you also got your son training as well. We also talked about a few interesting stories about your son defending himself. And how
Yes.
has martial arts played a part in your creative life, or just in general in your in how you live life? Because I know that some people see martial arts as like this violent practice and activity. But of course, every time I talk to martial artists, it's complete opposite. So how has
Well,
martial arts helped you with life and also your writing in general?
well, first of all, I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is different than other martial arts. So I think the other martial arts are more like dancing and meditation. So not to be disparaging, but I'm not first of all, and I should also mention I'm not great at jujitsu. I just do jujitsu.
Hey, still.
My son's actually good at jujitsu, and I'm just a guy that does it. But for me, I mean, one of the best things it ever did for me was, when I'm stressed at work, stressed with a writing or project, or I'm fighting with somebody or arguing with somebody, I go to practice, and it's like it weighs on me, before I go to
Mm,
practice, when I'm getting ready, when I'm getting on the mat. But the moment I'm in front of somebody, or I'm practicing and doing techniques and stuff, I stop thinking about it, because I need to focus
mm,
all my energy on what's happening in front of me, or I'm going to get my butt kicked by somebody.
yeah.
Um, and I find myself at the end of practice being like, what was I mad about? What was I sad about? Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
then like it hits me, but then it doesn't have that same hit anymore, because for that hour I was not focused on that. And you just
Hmm.
realize right away what's like important, what's not important, and being very physical. Jujitsu is like, I always say I'm like humping men. um,
It
so
is.
it's like I'm humping people, but like I have like, like I'm like super close to these people, and you just stop thinking about my project, or stop thinking about things that are going wrong or things that are going right too, and just focus on the moment, which is something I need to do more often.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu is it's all about the hips. And when you really think about the way that you get out of, shrimping and sweeping people, it's all about really just humping other
Yeah.
dudes,
Yeah. I got to get as close as possible to them.
it
Right.
just hip to hip, right?
Yeah.
You have to get your hip next to his hip, and you have to get used to, feeling certain things. And I know that you talked about you bringing your son into martial arts, and how is that? How have you seen that help him in his life, growing up in the crazy streets of LA?
Well, first, the most important thing is I tell them that you shouldn't be afraid of no one, that no one
Mm,
on the street could beat you up. Like, I told them, I joke, my wife hates it. I joke, I say you could be anybody at the school that he goes to. Like, no, like even a fifth grader when he was in 10th grade was not somebody that he couldn't beat up if he wanted to. And I was like, that I think there's power in that. Like, he's not afraid.
yeah.
When you walk down the street, you're not afraid of other children. Like, bullying is like, and then the second thing is that you could stand up for other people when you see something wrong.
Hmm.
Like, you don't have to be afraid. Like, you don't have to be part of the, oh my god, that kid's getting beat up. You could be part of the, let's like I'm going to rescue this guy and make sure that people aren't getting hurt, because when you're confident, when you feel confident, and you could stand up for yourself, you could stand up for other people as well. And I think that's like, those two things are things that are really, really important to me. I was really worried
Mm,
about my son getting bullied,
mm.
in general, because just with bullying being an issue, I just didn't want him to be bullied, and I also want him to stand up when people are bullied. So those are two things that are always important to me.
Oh, that's great. Do you find that as a theme in your writing as well? The idea of justice, of standing up for yourself, and making sure no one gets taken advantage of.
I wish that sounds great. No,
I'm
no,
just trying to entertain people here.
but I do think, as I've gotten older, I want to tell stories that are happier.
Oh, okay.
When I was younger, it's like, let's have a terrible story where everyone dies at the end. But now it's like, as I've gotten older, I'm like, I don't really want to watch stories where like terrible things keep happening to people. Like, I kind of want to be entertained in a positive way more than a negative way now.
Are you ever gonna go down the children's book route?
I mean, I've tried to write children's books before.
Hmm.
It hasn't really worked out. So
Dark
eventually,
endings. Everyone
eventually maybe.
dies.
Yeah, everyone dies at the end. But yeah, I mean, I think I do think it's something that I would want to explore at some point in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Koji, if you can tell a lot of the writers out there, just kind of advice, since you're coming from a producer's point of view of like how to get something made, getting their script made, what would you tell them? Like, what would you say is like a good route for them to get a script made?
a good route to get the script made, or a good writing advice?
I would say like the idea of getting, because I think writing advice is great because you kind of touched upon it before this,
Yeah.
but it's also like the idea of like what is the path towards getting a script bought and made? Because I think a lot of people on this podcast would also like to know, okay, how do I make a business? How to make a career out of writing,
Okay.
basically.
So first and foremost, do everything and anything, and always say yes. So what I mean by that is that there's no one way to make it in the writing or film business, right? If anybody tells you that, they're bullshitting you. So for example, like as a writer, I tell students, or I tell my friends, you should be entering every screenwriting competition you can find that's worth
Yeah.
it. You should be querying every manager or agent that you can find that's willing to take your query. You should be hitting up production companies that are looking for scripts. You should be networking as much as possible. You should be trying to raise money on your own. You should be trying to network with other people who have money. All the things that you need to do, because any of those routes, like any of them that make sense, that work, is a good route. But you don't know it till you do it. One of the biggest issues I see with a lot of writers is that they're looking for an agent and that's all they're doing.
Right.
You could look for an agent for 10 years. What if you never find one? Or you're looking for money for 10 years and you never find one. Like, I think it's all important. I'll tell you a story. I had a film I had a script at Fox for a while, and like it was going to be a huge project. I was super excited about it, and it seemed like it's always going to get made, right? But then it never did, and I waited for 3 years. I could have waited for 3 years and like watched it dissolve into nothingness, or I could keep working on other stuff, and as I create other stuff, if that happens, it's awesome. My career's even made more. But if it doesn't, I'm still doing other things, So I think that my advice then would just be, you got to do everything. And then the last part of that, by the way, is that whenever opportunity comes, you should say yes to it as much as possible. A lot of times, like, I'm writing, the best way for me to get my projects made is to write other people's projects. If you have an
Smart.
idea, you have money, you have something, then I'm going to write it. And I think a lot of people mistake their idea as the best idea, where I want to find your idea, make it into my idea.
It's sage advice. Honestly, to a lot of the writers out there, please take that to heart. Because I remember when I was a manager, just seeing the writers that I knew who were waiting for that one shot, or even got something optioned. Like, they'll shelve it for 18 months, right? What are you going to do for 18 months, right? That's an option. And you wait day by day, hoping that they're going to put into production, and you're doing rewrites over and over and over again. You can't just wait for that. Like Koji says, just be open to writing, meeting other people, seeing what's out there, being open to writing other people's projects, and just be consistently moving. And I think that's what a lot of creators have to really understand, is that if you're just staying stagnant and hoping for that one chance and that one person to pick up your script, you're going to just be waiting there all your life.
Yeah. And one of the things I've realized is that a lot of times, I mean, to my detriment in my career, sometimes a lot of the projects I've loved never get made. And a lot of projects I didn't think were going to get made, I didn't put as much effort in, actually ended up getting made, and one of the lessons I've learned is that I got to give 100% no matter what the project is. Because I've been watching my movies and been like, oh fuck, I should have tried harder. It was just a paycheck. Whereas, like, I never thought it would actually get made. Whereas, like, the project that I like, and so nowadays, what I try to do, and I've really spent a lot of time with, is like forcing myself to be like, okay, why do I love this project, even if it's not my project, even if I'm getting paid little or a lot, I have to find a love for it, because I just know it's going to be that project that I'm not giving 100% to. That's going to get, like, and that's the thing about being creative, right? You have so many like fishing lines in the water. Like, one of them happens, and all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, that's moving, and now it's like too late to fix it.
Right, and then it's on your IMDb and your resume, and you're like, damn. I should have just actually paid attention. But it's true. I mean, it happens also with creating videos online. Sometimes you put all this money into a short or a commercial or an ad, and you get like dismal views. And then one day you're just shooting something with your friend on your phone that you end up like just doing it out of a whim. And then that represents your videography ability. And you're like, I didn't even try. Don't watch that.
It always happens like that. I've had a couple of friends that tell me that as well.
Yeah, it's because when you put too much of your heart and soul into a project, it's almost like you expect too much. And God, the universe, whatever you believe in, it's almost like when you don't expect too much for something to happen, that usually happens.
Yeah. Well, also, the other thing that I think is important to understand for people is that once it's created, there's almost nothing that you could do to make it successful or not successful. Like you could write an awesome book that just comes out at the wrong time and nobody buys it.
Mm,
And it's not a reflection of your writing. It's a reflection of just it just didn't hit it right, like zeitgeist
timing.
at that moment, right? Or you
Yeah.
could write or you could write a bad book at the right time and have a hit as well. So it's like
Oh
you just have to
yeah,
get in that mind frame of like it's not once it's done, and you just got to move on. Like
that's
whether
right.
it's successful or not, you just got to keep creating stuff because you never know which one's going to be successful and which one's not going to be successful.
That's right. Well, Koji, I know you're a busy person, and I'm sure that your son is asking you where you are right now because he's outside beating up bullies. But before we go, I'd love for you to kind of just give it your last advice on the pitch. As a producer and a writer, the importance of the pitch. So for the writers out there, what can you give them as some advice of like how to pitch your story so someone can actually, get interested to buy it or at least, option it?
So is this an actual pitch or just when I meet people on the street or meet people at a party or something?
Oh, that's very true.
Those are
Let's
two
let's
different
do it
things.
for let's do it for business. Let's
Okay.
like in the actual room.
Okay. When I'm in the actual room, I think the most interesting thing, the most important thing is to be interesting and to be excited about it. And then also, so those are two things. And then the last thing is to be an expert on it because you're not just
Mm,
selling the idea, you're selling why you are the one should be writing it. So,
nice.
explaining and having them understand that you are the writer for this project. There should be no other person in the world that could write it like you. And that's part of what you need to get across. So a lot of times it's not even about the story, but it's about how you present it. What are the things that they learn about you that could help them understand why you're the writer for this project?
Facts. Great advice. All right, Koji, thank you so much for getting on the podcast and tell us in the world where can we find you online and how can we support?
Great. Well, you can find me at my website, www.koji Steven Sakai, Koji, Steven with a V, and Sakai, Sakai. All my socials, everything I do podcasts, everything's on there. And can I do a quick plug on my new podcast?
Please do plug anything.
Okay. I have a new podcast coming out called The Unofficial Official Story. It's with actor Jennifer Field and comedian Dwayne Perkins and myself, where we take a look at paranormal activities or conspiracies or just anything unexplained, and we create our own narrative to actually explain what happened.
Oh my God, please tell me when the first episode comes out because I am a big fan of the conspiracy theory and ancient
Yeah.
aliens. So anything that you can do to make these stories seem true, I am so interested.
So part of the thing about the show is that when you watch these paranormal shows or you listen to these podcasts, they're all the same. They always talk about the same stuff all the time, over and over and over. And it's like there's no new information. So what we've done is so we tell you that those facts, and then what we do is we tell you what we think might have happened, just off the off. Because frankly, our facts are equal to their facts. And so we create our own story. So our first, our teaser is going to be coming out on March 17th, and it asks the question of, was Mercy Brown? She's from Rhode Island, 1892, a vampire. So she was from. We ask the question and we kind of talk about it and have a debate. So,
Wow. And so was she a vampire?
well, you're gonna have to listen to the episode, but one of us chooses. Yeah, one of the choices is that she actually was a vampire, and it all went wrong. But we have
Wow.
fun. I mean, it's a fun show. We have fun with it. We don't take it super seriously, and we're just we're gonna deal with different issues. But it's really exciting because it's the podcast that I always wanted to do. I had multiple podcasts, but I really always wanted to do this show. So this is the one. So I'm excited. So please listen and subscribe.
Yeah, can I submit a few conspiracy theories of my own so that you can make them happen?
For sure, for sure. I mean, we're gonna
Tic
do
Tac.
QAnon.
Good. I was going to do Tic Tac UFOs and Bigfoot. Okay, so I want to know what Bigfoot is actually hiding.
We're gonna look at the original video that everyone knows. So we're gonna look at that case for sure, and then we're gonna do. I don't think we're gonna do the Tic Tac videos on the first season, but we'll definitely address. I mean, we definitely address UFOs. Our first episode is about Eisenhower and whether he met with the Nordic aliens or not.
Nice, and also about Hitler creating a spacecraft. That's what I want to know about. Hiding in Brazil, man.
Brazil, Argentina.
Oh, that's right, Argentina. That's right. I got it wrong.
Yeah, don't come to paranormal stuff with me, man.
Exactly. No, you've done your research, dude. Okay. Thanks, Koji. This is really fun. I'm really glad we got on this, and you have yourself a beautiful night. Thank you so much.
And thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Haven podcast. And if you dig it and like what you heard today, please give us a nice review and rating and share it with one of your friends that you think needs some creative inspiration. You can always find more content and resources at thecreativehaven.com and hit me up on Instagram at Mitchel Dumlao. And if you want to reach out, collab, or ask any questions, you have my permission to slide into my DMs. So keep positive, continue to learn and hone your craft, and create all day. Salamat.